is that the amount of information that everybody's trying to put their hands on, right, just keeps growing and growing. So that's really at the core of our mission. If you have seen or heard us talking over the last year or so, one of the things we try to get across really is the way that we're thinking about the problems that we're solving. And one way that you can look at this is that information is trapped in lots of different places. So when we began working on the AVAIL platform, now 7 or 8 years ago, the first place was, which I think everybody fully understands, is how difficult it is to manage information inside of the file systems. And obviously the frailties of using folders and file folders as ways to organize information just doesn't scale very well, has lots of limitations in what people are doing. But as we began working on, attacking that problem, what became very evident to us was that the information that you're trying to get to aren't just files in the file system, but a lot of times, and we use Revit as a great example, you've got data that's just trapped in the files themselves. So these Revit container libraries that people are trying to manage is a great example of that. Just think about that as a very cumbersome way to not only store, but retrieve and for people to get to that information. So you can think about that information being trapped in that way. And it also is trapped in the applications themselves. So when you're in Revit, even working on a project, it's just your same core problems are there. You're trying to navigate and get to a lot of information. So we've taken a very broad view as we've worked on the AVAIL platform on that, this isn't just about getting to information that's sitting out on the file system, but in what ways can we apply the same principles and the same core interfaces and things that we've learned along the way to attack getting to this information as it is stuck in files. And you'll see very examples of this. We have a tool called Harvest. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that around the Revit and getting to data like details that are trapped in these container libraries and freeing those up. What I will show you today, we just recently introduced a new Revit, an update to the Revit add-in, and a feature called Project Navigator. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what that, but it's a great example of just in the way that we're thinking about, can we help to get this information that's stuck? By and large, we refer to a lot of this information, especially out on the file system, as we refer to it as the loose content problem. You've got files that are just all over the place. And what I'm going to show you today is that we are working on trying to bring all this information and get it connected in some new ways. So I'm excited to preview some of the new features that we're working on for the next major release of AVAIL. And as soon as I run through this on the slides, I'm actually going to give you a live demo. So we're actually already into writing some code around all of this. So if for those of you that are new to the AVAIL platform, we are on a, about twice a year cycle of releasing major features. And what we see is that it a lot of times takes at least 6 months and sometimes a year before even our current customers can consume. So we're developing. We have a very rapid development cycle, always working on new features that are being deployed. We generally operate under as soon as a feature is ready. We try to put it out there and get people using it as soon as possible. But, when you look back over the last year, really about a year ago, we began releasing some new features. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth on these, but just as a refresher for everybody, we released a relative paths feature this past year, which helps coordinate and help manage when content is being stored on something like OneDrive or a SharePoint. We've solved some of the problems with the AVAIL platform about what it meant to get to that content through this relative paths feature. We continually updating our AVAIL Harvest for Revit. So as I said, the idea that you can manage detail libraries. We added support for Revit material management in there. So just a lot of features that were extended. We added this fall, we added support for view templates management in that AVAIL Harvest for Revit. About a year ago, or a little over a year ago, we introduced key cards, which is a major new feature that a lot of our customers are taking advantage of in letting you see visuals. As I get into the app and show you the demo, you'll see some of these features in action. We introduced this past year a concept called channel groups and application mappings, which you're going to see plays into this other feature that I'm going to concentrate on. Part of that release cycle was an improvement to the way we do search, and that was all being driven by really what manifests itself in this new Project Navigator inside of Revit, in the way that you can now search and get to information. So I'm going to spend some time, if you haven't seen that, and show you that today as well. That was really released, I think, in August. So a lot of people are just now getting that installed and starting to roll it out across their firms. But major efficiency and hopefully improvements at every desk with that new Project Navigator. And we had a major overhaul of our analytics platform this past year. So continuing to improve on the analytics, a lot of new, we standardized on Power BI backend for that platform. So just a lot of exciting things that were going along. So, these are all things that were just updated in the past year. So we're on this continual development cycle, taking all of our customers' feedback, looping it back through, working on kind of forward-looking things on our own, and combining those into what become major improvements to the platform as we keep moving forward. So I'm going to start with this Project Navigator feature, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of that. I'm going to show you some of the new stuff before in the slides before I pop up and start doing the live demonstration. But basically, inside of Revit now, you have the ability not only to search your content library, but the project itself. So we've taken the same concepts and our ability to make improvements to what it means to navigate that information that's inside your project, not just getting things out of the library. And the major challenge that the team had was, why should somebody working in Revit be concerned when they're looking for content, whether that content is already in the project or they need to go to the external library to get that? So we've done a lot of work in trying to streamline those workflows. And there's some other features like an instance navigator that I'll demonstrate for you that's gotten a lot of attention. For those of you that are new to AVAIL that are on this call, again, this isn't going to be a general pitch on AVAIL, but this is, as I show you some of the new things, it's kind of building on this concept that I'm getting ready to talk about. So one of the things that a lot of our customers appreciate, and the reason that they chose AVAIL, is that AVAIL is not only content agnostic, but the location of where that data lives. So, in this example, in this slide, right, you've got lots of, and this is getting more and more complex. You've got lots of information that lives in lots of places. You've got lots of different cloud-based storage solutions now, intranet sites, just lots of different places where content lives. And of course, lots of different applications. Most of our customers, especially the larger firms, have well over 100, 200 different applications in their workflow. So there's lots of different kinds of files, lots of kinds of information that's being generated, and that data is all being stored out in these various locations around the networks now. And AVAIL, this kind of, I'll call it the first phase, was that we began to give a common interface through AVAIL to all this information. So you didn't really have to know where that stuff was. You could use AVAIL's interface to search for that. So that's been kind of the core premise of what we've been doing. But as as we now sit and look at what is the next kind of generation of problems that we can begin to attack and solve with the platform, we kind of break this down into a couple of new major problems that you'll see us beginning to develop features to attack. One is that information is actually connected. Very rarely are these files or these pieces of information islands. They're not single. They are themselves single pieces of content, but usually it's part of a connection. They're interconnected pieces of information that are related to one another. And ultimately, our vision has always been that instead of you having to go to that content or that information, it should come to you. And that's still, a promise that as we develop these features that we're working hard to try to bring to fruition. And I think you'll see exciting things over the next year as we start to really invert, instead of you having to go out to things, to have that information coming to you. So if I go back to this diagram and talk about that, all of that information, I blanked out the individual files and what kind of file formats they were, because that's kind of irrelevant about what data source or where those what form that information takes. But when you think about that, this stuff is connected. There really are threads. I've been talking about kind of threads of how do you connect these kinds of pieces of information that are related to each other. Thus today's talk, that we can relate. So what we're working on now is this ability to, how do we help to make connections between information so that when you're touching a piece of information, there's also other information that goes along or is available to go along with it, instead of each individual piece being its own journey or destination that you're out kind of searching for. And once that information is connected, then really what we want to then think about is, hey, if we now understand you, as somebody that's working on a project, can we now begin bringing that information to you? So this is those two problems. First of all is, how do we get information connected to one another? And then ultimately, when it's connected, those connections will start to help us to make this much easier to bring that content to you in the context of whatever it is that you're working on. So this is all just part of an ongoing journey for us on this efficiency. And I always, I've been talking about this internally here at AVAIL for years, that we need to invert that instead of people going to this information. And it was always hard to figure out what the language and how to talk about that. I was calling it an inversion of the web. My kind of big story was that, we've solved the ability, the web, the network is in place and all that information's out there, but we're used to having to go to each of these little files or repositories of information to get something. The real trick now is, if we're understanding what you're working on, how can we begin to invert that? Can we begin bringing you the information that you need next based on what you're doing? So we're really on the AVAIL platform. We're laying that groundwork now, and you're going to see that in some of these new features that we're beginning to introduce. So I take a quick sip of water. So we are now working on what will ultimately manifest itself should be in the first half of next year, a major release cycle, what we'll end up calling AVAIL Desktop 5.0, but it's basically the 5th generation of the AVAIL platform. So whenever we're doing these things, we'll have kind of major feature releases, and then there'll be other features that may get rolled into those release cycles. You saw all those things that I started out this call with that we released over the past year, and features that we're rolling in on the 4.0. But this will be a major release cycle for us, the 5.0. And what I'm going to preview for you today are some of the features that are underway now, either in design or actually being coded, that are going to be the kind of major pieces of this new 5.0 release. So the first one is what we're calling related content. Hopefully the name makes sense. A lot of times you just start talking about these things, and the way you talk about it, that becomes the language that you use to describe it. But this is our first steps towards what does it mean to make relationships between information. And then ultimately, we're also working on some new workflow tools. If you've been around AVAIL over the last really couple of years now, we began working on a plugin architecture. Those plugins for AVAIL we call lenses. I'm going to show you at least some design mock-ups and a specific workflow where we're designing a new feature called lists that'll help enable some of these kinds of workflows. So I'll give you a little preview of what we're thinking on that front as well. But I can actually, the related content, if you were at AU a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas, we were actually on the floor showing off some of this new related content features. So this is just hot off the presses of us being able to show and talk about this. So the other thing that you'll find out about AVAIL, if you haven't been around us much, is that we tend to be very open and vocal about the things that we're working on and the roadmap. And we do that intentionally to get as much early feedback on these things. As we develop these features, we usually like to try to develop them around specific stories of what our customers' problems that we're trying to solve. So we, as we're doing the design and development of these things, love to put together very specific stories so that we make sure that when we're developing it, that we have very specific use cases in mind that we know are going to help solve our customers' problems. So one of the things I'm going to ask you all today is, as I'm showing you this, be thinking about what use cases, because I'm going to give you a few examples that we kind of put out there. I like to say we like to put things out there and let you punch at it. So I'll show you some examples that we've come up with around how that we think that this could be useful. But even during today's call, if as I'm showing you this, there are some things I'd love for you to throw that into the chat, and we should have plenty of time here at the end of this call to answer some questions. But if you want to put some ideas into the chat about where you think that this could be very useful, or the first problems that you think that it could help to solve, we'd love to hear that. All right, so this is my clue. I'm actually going to go to the live demo, and I'm actually going to start. Actually going to just going to minimize this so that I can get it out of the way. So I'm going to start with just showing you that Project Navigator inside Revit if you haven't seen it, because it is available, and it's something that hopefully you should start taking advantage of inside the firm sooner or later. And the first thing that I'll show you, though, just real quick, I'm going to go, this is the AVAIL Desktop. For those of you that aren't customers and aren't used to using it, we organize information in what we call channels inside of AVAIL. It's all searchable. One of the things that was released earlier this year was this concept of channel groups. So this allows you to organize your channels and filter those out very quickly. So there's benefits there for the end users as you begin to put more and more information in AVAIL, you end up with more and more channels, thus need for better content management tools and filtering around these things. So we released this or added this concept of channel groups. And then just real quickly, the other feature that was a companion to that release cycle was what we call application mappings. So now you can, from specific applications, decide which channels to put focus on. So when searches are performed, and I'll show you this when I'm demonstrating, here I am in Revit 2024, which is what I'll be demonstrating from. Instead of searching across all of these channels, what we would call a global search, we will still do a search across all the information, but we're able to bring back search results in a very focused way through these application mappings. So that's a great new feature and very powerful as you begin to use it to put focus on what's happening inside the search. So I'm going to go ahead now and pop up Revit. So I've got a Revit project here. So when you install the latest update, we have what's now called Project Navigator. And I tend to, I'm going to tear this off just so that you guys can see it, but this is the new Project Navigator add-in. And I tend to dock mine with the project browser. I'm always very clear to say that our goal is not to replace, we will never replace what you do in the project browser. What we look for, though, are the frailties in these parts of the core system and try to pick off those frailties. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of that. And if you haven't started using 2024, they actually made some improvements to search in this Project Navigator. But I'm just going to give you an example before I switch over and show you. But if I were to search for door, right, inside the normal project browser, I can see, legends, all the information in the project that's related to door. But if I go down to the families or something that I might be wanting to access, I can't get to the types. I can't see any of that information. In fact, if I want to, I need to select one of these and then actually cancel the search, which keeps me selected. And then at that point, it breaks me back out. Then I can open up and see where the types are and then maybe use those in the project or do something inside the project. So, there's just these little, parts of the existing, built-in tools that are just kind of frustrating to use. So I'll use that as the example. So I'm going to flip over now to the Project Navigator. So you can think about the new AVAIL Project Navigator feature is it's all the information that's in your project. And what we're doing is we're giving you the ability to filter. So if I just want to see the sheets that are in the project, that's all searchable. So if I knew I was looking for a plan view, I can search, and I'm filtering now to just the sheets for the plan view. And I might want to, I can open that up. If I double click on that, it's just navigation. That's the name, Project Navigator. No different than if you were in the built-in project browser in Revit. We're just going to help you navigate around and get to this information. The things that we then begin to work on, though, are things like, if I did that search for doors in the project, here's everything about doors. We'll let you filter down to, yes, I'm just looking for the families. But you'll notice that in this interface, not only will we, show you the doors that are in there, but you can immediately see, right, just by rolling open that dialog, what the types are, how many types, are loaded into the project. So let's go to like this double flush door here, or single flush. Where's that one? Single flush door. So, here are all the types, and I could begin modeling with this just by dragging and dropping over. But you'll notice over to the right, we're also showing you how many instances of each type has actually been placed into the project, which can come in very useful. We've seen customers and talked to customers who end up using schedules to try to understand, what's in the project. So those are all stories that we like to hear, because what we end up doing is saying, look, we can touch this information. Why aren't we bringing that back as part of the workflow to help people put their hands on that information? So the other thing that you'll notice here is that, we'll tell you how many instances have actually been used in the project. And if I click on that, that actually opens up, just popped up right here. This actually opens up what we call the Instance Navigator. So this is all 25 of those instances of that specific type of the door in the project. And what you'll notice is that we're actually showing you where each of those doors are. We're also pulling and telling you which level it's on and what the host is. And a really cool feature of this is you can see up here, by default, that was grouped by which room it's in, but I can switch and say, show me which level those are on, and group this by the levels, or group this by the host, show it to me in this different context. So this is an example where, as we think about navigating this kind of information, we're always in these tools trying to put the information together in new ways and new flexible ways that allow you to more easily navigate that information. So this is I'm demoing with the new sample project that ships with Revit 2024. So to me, you all know better than I, but this is a great example where it's like, I've got a 60-minute, I assume, fire rating on this door type. And here I can look at, I've got hosts, which are 2-hour firewall partitions. So, this is an example like, is there a mismatch between the content that we're using or what we're using in that particular situation? And the other thing that this does, though, is for each one of these, I can click on the little hourglass over here, and actually this Instance Navigator will go open a view and find and take me directly to where that particular instance is. So it's just a great way for you to be able to find, especially if you're a manager, a BIM manager, or VDC manager. It's like, and you're not living in the project every day and you're needing to go find something, this Navigator can be a great way to help you do that. So I'll just give another example. Like if I was looking for CMU, I might have specific views of that CMU. We'll do things like show you over. We're trying to pick up the same language that that Revit started doing. They're trying to show you now if it's actually in use, and so we picked up on that same language. If you see that, we'll actually say that that is in use. And like, here's the actual drafting view, but we'll tell you if it's actually placed on a sheet or not. And again, I can click and just open up that sheet to where that is. The other thing, though, that I was going to show you is that if I went to the families that are actually CMU families, again, I can open up and see the types and see that 2 of those are actually being used, and open up the instance navigator. And with one click, that's going to go help me find exactly where that CMU family is being used inside of one of these views. So hopefully you'll find a lot of utility. This is a brand new feature for us, so I'm sure we'll continue to add new features to this. So your feedback as you start to use it is critical in us continuing to add those new features as they come along. So that's the new Project Navigator feature. So I'm going to flip back now. Oh, so what I didn't show you was the connection. Then let's just go back to the door example. If I'm searching for a door, right here, I am searching through the families that are already in the project, looking for either specific family or types that have been loaded into the project. If that is not in your project, then you're just one click away, as you'll see me do here, with searching your library. So with one click now, without having to go retype in what you're searching for, we now are searching across your library through AVAIL. And you'll notice up across the top, this goes back to those application mappings. I'll pop that up just so you can see. We told Revit, or told the application that, hey, if you're coming from Revit, here's the priority that you should bring back this information and content for relevance in these searches. So that's what you're seeing now. We brought back these search results, and now you have the ability to filter out. Maybe you were looking for visualization content that was related to, not sure why those are those were related to doors. Here's materials that were related to doors. Here's manufacturer information and content that was related to doors. So we're just trying to, we're still doing those broad searches, but we're bringing back these search results in now a very focused way to bring that information. And then, with this Project Navigator, you can drag and drop. You'll notice as you make selections in here, you can pop up the type and parameters dialog that's going to pop up now and allow me to decide what I'm going to bring into this project. So all very tightly connected. And this took us a while longer than we anticipated. We began rolling out some of these features early this year, and we just got this Project Navigator kind of finished up through the summer and released officially in August. So if you haven't started taking advantage of that, that's something you want to go take a look at. All right. On to what's next. So this idea of related content, I kind of cheated. I tagged some content in here that I've already kind of set up for this. So I'm just doing a search. Great example of being able to use a content management system to do what you're trying to do. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what we mean by related content. I'm going to show you now how we're beginning to put this in the interface. Just forward looking, this is still in dev. So even though this is obviously been coded and we're working on it, things may change as we move forward, but you'll get the idea. So here are examples where I've got content that's living in the library. I'll use these doors as an example. So if I open up what's called the content view, you'll see that I've got this door family. But what you'll see in this dialog below is I'm actually have now related content that goes with that. In this example, it might be details that are in the detail library that want to go along with that content or be available to go along with that content. So you can see we take advantage of our high resolution previews. This is actually harvested content that's living in being managed in a detail library. And I can preview and see, and those are things that have been connected to this family in the library. And again, this interface may change, but it's as easy for those that have editing privileges to just click on it editing and literally dragging and dropping content and organizing it in this way to make those connections between the information. So this is our first step towards being able to build these relationships. If I minimize this desktop, what you'll see over, like say in Revit, is as I'm choosing those details, I have the ability to either drag and drop these in. I can multi-select and bulk load these kinds of things back into the project. So this is all tightly connected. And as you begin to make relationships, this is what we mean by bringing that information to you. I didn't have to go off and do another search for where are those details that go along with this specific family or groupings of this kind of information. So that's all. That's one example. You could think about things like these system families, which are being managed through our Harvest and AVAIL as individual items. Here's an example where I might take a system family, but I've got materials, Revit materials that are being stored in the library that want to go along with that. That might be applied to, in the context of a project like that. So again, these are families that are being, managed in the library, but those are being now associated with specific things that you might be bringing into the project. And again, rather than going off on a wild goose chase for those specific materials that make sense in the context of that, you can now click, open that back up, and I'll show you where we're making some of those connections as well. Other things you can think about. Here's an example of like a electrical lighting fixture or an LED light. This also is not only content that's like other families, but you can now think about relating to IES libraries or IES and even external sources where that information lives. Back to what I showed you, this is why it's important. Information in AVAIL can be any place, any different system where you've got information. It can take the form of files, technical content, but it's also things like PDF documents, URLs, intranet information. So with this new related content feature, you're going to be able to connect any and all of that kind of information. So I'll just give you a couple of other examples here. One is, here's a park bench. I'm going to use this as an example, but here's the bench in the library. But, here I've got an external commercial provider that I've actually just made a connection into our library. That's obviously just meant to be a generic placeholder in your project for a park bench. But here I'm connected to actual providers of these park benches. This is a URL to their website where I can now quickly navigate. And again, I don't have to go out on that chase. Those connections have been made. And now that's conveniently there. And here's an example where I might have then specific materials, right, that go with that park bench or that I want to, be able to quickly access or make changes to as part of this relationship. So I'm going to use this as an example because I'm going to go over here in a second back to the project and show you how these relationships can get. Our goal is to automate these relationships as much as possible. So I'm going to show you examples of how in a real project that something like this might start to act. Another just quick example, though, is we've also started talking with some partners about what it means to connect information like your learning materials. So some of you may be familiar with a company called Amberbook. We've actually started conversations, I'll just say a relationship starting to form with them. But this is an example where, again, you might have something like your plumbing fixtures and things that are in your library, but now that can be connected directly to things like your training library. So with Amberbook, right, this is some of their seminars and things on plumbing and kind of learning materials that might want to go along. So our vision for this is, look, this isn't relegated to just the technical information, but it's also kind of the learning that goes on. And what better time for somebody to learn or be willing to brush up on something, whether you're 22 years old or 52 years old, right? Sometimes you want to just quickly get back to things, brush up on it in this industry. And so being able to make those connections so that contextually when you're thinking about that and doing that work, that's right when you want that information to be right there at easily accessible. So we think those are some great examples of that kind of context. The other types of things then that you'll see us doing, we already have through AVAIL, we've begun delivering manufacturer content. So you're going to see us beginning to curate. I'll just give you examples, like on the MEP side. Here is a piece of information, or piece of content that is being delivered through the AVAIL Select channels. And, but here you can see we're relating to like the product catalog that can go along with that. And here's the specifications document that goes with that. And, other documents that are designed to go with it. What's important to understand about what I'm just doing right here is those documents are actually still hosted on the manufacturer's sites. So it's a single point of truth for the most current version of that document, but it's connected to content that ultimately originated from the manufacturer, but is now down inside your company's firewall in the projects. So we're keeping the relationship of that information to be connected. I've started talking about this as a golden thread. It's like there's all this information that ultimately, if it's on people's websites and you have to download it, it's like it gets dumb again. You have to go figure out, where am I going to store that? Where does it go so that I can know to get back to it? Our goal with this related underlying concept of related content is that this stuff should stay connected all along the way and accessible for you when you need it. And then more importantly, you don't have stranded kinds of information that's out there that you don't know. It was downloaded a year ago. I have no idea if that's the latest version of it or if something was corrected. So we really think that this is at the core of this kind of next, I'll say, generation of problem solving that we're trying to do with the AVAIL platform, which is to start to connect this stuff and make sure that it stays connected all along the journey. So if I pop back over to this Revit project, and I'm going to show you again, these are just some early mock-ups, but I want to use this to get the concept across. But if I were to look for that park bench inside of this project, here's the park bench, right? I can see, if I wanted to see that there's 5 instances of that, I could use my instance navigator to go find where that is in the project and navigate around to finding that information. But you can now think about that when that park bench was in the library, that the library item was brought into the project. So if I click, you'll notice here we've got a little icon. Again, this UI may change as we move forward in our design of this. But if I wanted to click on that, it's going to open back up the reference of where was that library item. And the usefulness of this is to get back to that related information. So here you can see it's like, well, there was that manufacturers that we might want to be looking at, or I want to get back to these materials or something that's related to that from the library context. But another thing that you can think about is that when basically a copy of that bench came out of the source library and into the project, think about that it's literally a copy of that thing now is in the project context. Well, that's a new context of which things might want to be related to that bench. So if I click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to open up this dialog, but this is actually a different related instance of that park bench. So now we're at the project context. And now at the project context, I have the bench, and what this relationship now is showing, here was the source bench, because that bench may have been edited or something in the project, right? Happens all the time. People make edits for whatever reason about that. So we're going to have a connection back to the source, the original source, if you need to get back to it. There are those materials that stayed related, but here's where it gets interesting. I can click down here, and this is in a project context. There's a Miro board. There's parts of the team that are out working in something like Miro, and you'll see that that's opened up that context in Miro where somebody's doing design work or making some decisions about what that looks like. And again, you'll notice if I click on that, things like Miro we're actually able to go all the way down to a very specific target, even on a Miro board that might have a lot of information. So now somebody's out from that generic product, trying to make some other kind of choices or selections. So as we learn from you all about how these teams and what different teams are using and what tools they're using, it's not just the content in your library, but the future of this, we think, is going to be making relationships to these workflows and where this information is. And you'll even notice on here with the right tools, there's the material and a link on the Miro board, which from Miro lets me click on and actually get back into the Revit library of where that is. So I'm going to be bringing that into a project. So I just want to get your wheels turning and thinking, all of this won't come into fruition immediately, but we think it's going to be a very powerful new core feature of AVAIL to begin to make these relationships between things and to be able to pull information. That's the way I think about it. You want this information to be connected and pulling along, and that's what I mean by information coming to you. It's like it's being drug along. It's not me having to figure out where that thing is and go out to it and go find it again. So hopefully you'll find that a very powerful feature there. So let me, I'm going to kind of go back to my slide deck real quick. And before we run out of time, show you just a couple of other things. So first of all, with this related content, we're going to solve this. We're going to start road mapping these major features for you so that you'll start to understand how this is going to come out and evolve in phases. The first phase of this will be what we'll call static or manual associations. You saw me pop up the little edit that said, we're trying to make it as easy for you all to make these connections between things, like just simple drag and drops. But over time, what the real goal will be to automate as much of that. So a future phase after we get this initial release out will be to begin working on how do we dynamically make these connections to things so that you don't have to manually do things, and what those workflows. And those dynamic connections are very related to, no pun intended, what you're wanting to relate, where that information is, how we might think about automating those relationships. So that's why it's important for us to start hearing from you all the stories about where and how you think this would be useful. It's critical to us, doing the next phase of work on our side. One last thing, and then I'll open this up. I saw some people putting some questions or comments in, and we'll try to get those addressed. But another feature that we're working on, and this is actually a very specific example being driven by one of our customers, but I think everybody will find this. The way we work on the product side is we, of course, get from all of our customers, we get a lot of activity on feature requests and things. So we go through those and we try to find out what they have in common. People refer to things different ways, describe to us different workflows. Then we try to boil that down into what can we do that's going to give the most impact and solve the largest number of problems. So one of these things that we're working on now is what we're calling lists. You can see actually these are just mock-ups that we're working through some design, but here we're calling it palettes. But the idea is that you're going to be able to put content in a temporary list. Think of it as like a really user-generated short-term list. You could end up keeping them forever, but they may also be very short-lived in that you're just wanting to pass some information to somebody. So what you're seeing here is what a customer asked us for was, hey, we use AVAIL very effectively to manage our detail library, but the project managers that need to go look in the library for certain details on a specific project want to pluck out details, do a markup like in Bluebeam or something, and then pass that over to somebody in Revit to actually make changes to those details for a specific project. So what you're seeing here is another feature set that we're working on. The idea is that you would go in, find these details, put them in a list, and then what you're seeing over here to the right would be a new plugin, Lens. This one's called Redline. And so the idea is that you might come into your library, select a handful of details. Those, you'd open up this lens, and now, based on that selection, generate a PDF document that you can go do, create the PDF, and then that PDF could then be opened up, do some redlining in Bluebeam, save it back, and now you've got this PDF document. Again, this is where the relationships come in this other core related content. That PDF document that was created now is attached to this list or this palette of content that was created. Now the person gets past what may not be clear is if you look up the top, that can be assigned to somebody. It can be shared with somebody specific. So somebody's going and doing this and passing it off to somebody else through this interface. You could do things like add a due date or things, these are the kind of features that we're looking to add to this, and then pass that on to them. Then instead of them having to go now in an email or somewhere else, if they're the ones now that are opening this up in Revit, now all of a sudden they touch that list, and in their interface, they can now bring in those details with one click into Revit to do their redlining or edits on, right? And some interface in AVAIL will always have now your to-dos and what's been shared with you and your ability to get around this, to find this information in these new ways. So, we're really working on what's this next set of features that are going to help drive workflows around this content, this information. So I think some exciting things. We'd love to hear your feedback on that, but those are some exciting things that we're working on. All of this, right, is kind of back to where I started. This idea that content wants to come to you. Here we're calling it flipping the script. How does content come to you, find you, instead of you having to go to it? So underlying this related content initiative, this is a core piece of what we're going to build on for the future of this information coming to you instead of you going to it. And ultimately, as we begin to put these pieces in place, you can see here at the bottom, this is going to lead to a suggestion engine inside of AVAIL. This is putting the pieces in place for that golden thread of information that when something has been updated in the library, maybe a detail you found a mistake in, and now you want to know what all projects was that used in that might currently be that need to be updated. This is where we'll start to put the pieces together to be able to alert and notify. And I'm always clear to tell people, we'll have the ability not to broadcast that out because that's when people stop paying attention. We can actually narrowcast that message. We'll have the ability to know who placed that detail on the sheet in that project and send them that notification because they're the ones that probably are in the best position to know if something that's been updated over here should be brought in and updated in the project. So I think you'll see as we begin to roll this out, very critical new pieces of the AVAIL platform that are going to unleash a bunch of new exciting features in the coming months, years as we continue to work on this. So I'm going to look at and see what questions you all have been asking along the way. But as you think about that related, what kind of relationships, if you don't mind, pop it into just here into the chat. We'd love to just see what y'all are thinking. If you're an existing customer of ours, go through our customer success team and give us some feedback, or if you want to set up a one-on-one on this, we'd love to have these conversations and then have some very specific use cases as we're continuing to develop this to help make sure that we're building the right things for you. So very active roadmap. I've ran through at the beginning of this, all the things that were released in 2023. We're, of course, now working on features that are going to be in the first half of 2024, including this related content and what we call workspaces, which is going to be around the project context and how we know to make these relationships. So a lot of exciting things that we're continuing to work on from that standpoint. So with that, I'm going to, Will, are you still on here? Were there any questions came up?
Yeah, we've got one we answered live already, but an earlier question came in from Kevin. Can related content feature be used with content located in harvest destination channels?
Yes, you can relate information from channel to channel. Any place, the first go round of this will be the information, anything you have indexed and managing in AVAIL, you'll be able to make relationships between them. So channel to channel across all of that. You'll also be able to manage URLs. We're working towards the URL not having to already be indexed in AVAIL, but just being able to pop URL links in. The other things that we're trying to figure out, if you've used our tag.io, which is the ability to take information that's in AVAIL and pop it out into a spreadsheet for management. So imagine managing the links to related content through a spreadsheet and being able to put that in and push that back into the system. So we're just trying to work through now, like, okay, what are the kinds of related information, and then ultimately how those going to get related to each other, and what are the tools that we'll put in place to help you manage those kinds of things. So thanks for that.
And one enthusiastic comment: connecting training content with standard families, both written and video based. Bring it, all caps.
Bring it. Yeah. So I agree. To me, that's a really exciting. The reason I'll just tell a quick story. The reason that I was at the AIA conference in San Francisco earlier this year and got introduced to the founder, Michael Ehrman, who's the founder of AmberBook. And we didn't know each other, and he didn't know much about AVAIL. I didn't know much about AmberBook, but literally within just a few minutes, I was telling him some of these things that we're working on this front, and the ability to take content like what he is an expert at developing, this learning material, and get that connected. I described it to him, which is what he latched onto. I was like, there's this golden 5 minutes of when somebody's actually working on something that if you can get that information right in front of them, you've got the best chance that they're actually going to take advantage of it. If it's off in some other system that they've got to now remember their login to, or go figure out where that is, or go off into some other content management system to now find something, I like to say the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Most people will, I'm not going to do it. So learning as in this industry has been relegated to like once a year, go get your continuing education credits, or go do this learning. So if you can begin to think about just-in-time learning, which is, let's take all these little bits of information and bring it in the context of what you're doing, then it's going to be great for everybody. And it's not just something, like I said, that a 22-year-old who's just new to the firm and doesn't understand how a building goes together needs. It's that person like me, the 50-some-year-old that, hasn't done this in a while and wants to brush up on something. So I like to think about those kind of longer term implications of what it means to bring all this information together. So I share your enthusiasm that I think that's going to be a great kind of use case. So any other questions or use cases that that anybody's
Not seeing any right now.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining this. Again, I wish I could hand it to you right now, but we like to show these things off. It's real enough now that we're in the throes of the dev plan and the schedule, and obviously writing code for all of this. So if there's something that got you thinking, wheels turning, reach back out through our customer success team, share that with us so that we can, and again, we can set up some one-on-one calls if it's warranted with your team to talk about this. But these are things that our goal is through the first half of the year, late first quarter and into the second quarter, our plan is to start delivering some of these features. So looking forward to an active 2024 with a lot of great new features that are coming online. So thanks for spending some time with me today, and reach out when you need to talk to us. Thank you.